It's a distinct honor to have our candidate for governor, Dennis Richardson, here to chair this panel this afternoon. As residents of Oregon, there are needs in our state. There are issues that sorely need to be addressed. And so the purpose this afternoon is to bring this panel to discuss these issues that are close to home and close to each of our hearts. I'd like to start, my wife Glenda has a few announcements, I think. Glenda?
Okay, I wanted to make some acknowledgments and thank yous here. And first I'd like to thank Stella Gunther, who is the president of the Benton County Republican Women's Group. Stella, would you stand? Linda Barcher, who made some amazing cookies out there that we all tried. And Kim Rowe, hospitality for all of us. Thank you very much. And Ted and Vicki Fulmer for their part in the goodies. And then afterward, we're going to have the meet and greet and have some pizza, and that's provided generously by Stan and Ted. Thank you too for providing our pizzas. Yes, and then I wanted to make an announcement for Dennis Richardson's campaign. Two things. First of all, if you're not, haven't given me your email, phone number, especially your email, I'd like to have that because there's this wonderful newsletter that you could get to keep up with everything going on with the campaign. And if you would like to volunteer for who knows what, just let me know and I'll check that column too that you would like to volunteer for the campaign. So thank you very much and thank you all for being here.
Now, welcome Dennis Richardson and our issues panel.
Before we get into the actual subjects of the questions that we'll be discussing, I'd like to have each of you take just a minute and tell who you are and why you happen to be here. Just what your position. Donald, just start.
I'm Donald Handelan. I'm president of College Republicans. I'm a MSU student.
Okay, tell a little bit about you, though.
A little bit about me. So I'm originally from Alaska. So some of the really fine Oregon issues I might not be able to give the full perspective on. I'll give the best I can.
Great. This is called the elevators, the elevator introduction, you know, where if you're in an elevator, what can you say about your candidacy in that short of a time to let people know who you stand for, and so, or what you stand for and who you are. So, let's hear from you, Joy.
You need to speak up.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jo Ray Perkins. I am the first candidate to have filed on the GOP ticket to run to displace Jeff Merkley for the United States. My background, I just graduated from Oregon State University in June of this year, of 2013. I had the opportunity after the kids were grown to come back and finally get my undergrad, so I decided to do it in political science. Since I knew I was going to be in this race, I figured, well, why not poli-sci with a minor in speech communication. I met my husband when I was 16, going on 17. We're about to celebrate 35 years of marriage. We have 2 adult children. And when our son gets married in June, we will officially have 10 grandchildren. Right now we have 6, but we consider her 4 to be grandchildren already. And my husband's a self-employed carpet installation contractor. So we understand business. So my background is financial planning, investments, helping people with their budgeting, getting out of debt. I've been in real estate. I consider myself to be a Main Street American who really understands what it's like to go through the good times and the not so good times. And I understand what that is. So I'm Jo Ray Perkins. Thank you. Glad to be here. Thank you, Dennis.
Well, you've already heard an introduction of me, but I will say that I'm here because the same reason you are, to support our candidates, to talk about the issues, to find out how, and to articulate how we can make a difference in Oregon. And this panel is a way to do that. As mayor, I've had a chance to address a number of the issues on here, and I look forward to providing some of my own thoughts that I've learned over the last few years in that capacity. So that's good enough.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Callahan. I am running for the U.S. Senate against Jeff Merkley. I can tell you, there's one guy that needs to be put out the pasture. I got in his face a little bit this last weekend in Madras and Eugene, and that guy thinks he's entitled to a job that he should not be entitled to. So, one thing on this campaign, as I've been traveling the campaign trail, my daughters have been with me here, and they're here with me today. One thing that I've been finding is the common thread throughout Oregon, throughout everyone I talk to, all the groups and stuff like this, it's that one thing, and that one thing is freedom. My team and I have been running our campaign on 5 things, though: leadership, integrity, character, honor, and trust. It's 5 things that I learned from my parents, who were both in the Navy, and I'm also an Eagle Scout myself. So I kind of have an upbringing on knowing what our country is supposed to be about, and again, that's that one thing. I'm Mark Callahan. I'm running for the U.S. Senate. Thank you. May God bless America.
Hi, I'm Senator Betsy Close, and I represent the Currier right here, Senate District 8 in the Oregon Legislature. I serve as Vice Chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I also serve on rural communities and economic development. So those will be very key committees as we go into this one-month session that will start February 3rd. You'll see some things that may be referred to the ballot. It's real important for you to watch what goes on in the next session, because you will be voting on many of those things very soon. I want to say a word about my friend, Representative Richardson. I've known him for over 10 years, and he's one of the most capable, he's certainly the most intelligent legislator that I've ever worked with. Everything that he has said to you, you can count on. He's done so many things in the legislature. He is a person that has exactly what we need as a governor. He knows the law, he knows the business issues, he knows the budget inside and out. And so I just want to tell you that I highly recommend him to you. Thank you.
All right, so let's dive into it. We've got, I think we will go to about, let's have questions and answers at the end of each question, and I'll let you know when we have just a couple of more minutes on each one, so that, because some of these topics are going to stimulate greater interest than others. And so rather than say, we're going to have this time for every question, I want to kind of work through the questions and see where the interest is. And so we'll be flexible, but we will be in the time. So I'd like to begin with Senator Close, and I will have you, if you would, begin the discussion, and you just begin it, and others will comment, and then we'll also have questions. Not everybody has to comment on every issue, okay? But we're just going to have a discussion here and take questions as well. The area for your topic is urban growth boundaries and private land use rights.
Okay, well, just briefly, our land use system goes way back to the early 70s when Senate Bill 100 was passed. If you've never looked at it, it didn't have all the things in it that we now have in our land use law. LULA wasn't in there, I believe. And so it's grown into a mass of regulations that become very prohibitive for people. You'll see us in the legislature sort of peeking away at it. You'll see, like I had a bill in my committee when I chaired Water and Environment, and we had the land use bills, and it was a flag lot bill, so that people that wanted to build on a flag lot could do that. And that's just an example of the small bills you see, because we really can't change the law. It would probably take an act of the people to do that. But what we've ended up with is a system that's almost communistic, in that our property owners cannot use their property to create jobs or to revitalize communities. And that's what we need to do. So it's an important area. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other panel members that would like to speak out on this topic?
I would.
Please.
Go for it.
Okay. Well, the city of Adair Village just dealt with this recently, so I have a lot of thoughts on it, but I'll keep them short. And unfortunately, in Oregon, we have a system where uninvested stakeholders are able to make and influence decisions on land use. And it severely cramps the ability for communities to grow in a reasonable, thoughtful, logical way, because outside influences that are not impacted by the growth of that area are then restricted from growing. It's simply not a workable system. The idea behind growth in Oregon that is good is our goals to make growth contiguous, meaning that a community can't just grab some land over here, over there, with a lot of space in between, and just grow by grabbing land. The growth has to be contiguous. So that basic concept is good, that we don't have farmland between two parts of the city, that sort of thing. And it makes a lot of sense as far as infrastructure and facilities that are needed by the city. But in our case, what happened was we had a number of folks that were able to essentially stop the growth of our city. Now, the residents of Adair Village made it very clear that they wanted to grow. We had polled them, we had talked with them, we had had town hall meetings, and they very much wanted to grow. Some communities do want to grow. And so the restriction on that growth hurt our community. So what I'm looking forward to is a style of government that I'm sure we'll see here soon that allows communities to develop their own criteria for growth that are reasonable and that outside uninvested stakeholders cannot stop or prevent that growth. Growth is necessary for human life. Some areas grow, some areas scale back, but over time, without that growth happening somewhere, you don't have the dynamics necessary to stimulate economy and to create jobs. So very, very, very important.
Any other comments? Oh,
So on the private land use rights on the other side of this coin, we've got the federal government who's stepping in places that they don't belong. So running for the US Senate, I look at this and I go, this is a states' rights issue, which goes down to a county issue, which goes down to a city issue. And it needs to be, these things need to be handled at the local level, to have the federal government stepping in and telling people, well, you can't build here because there's this little waterway that travels through here. Folks, if we had the land use laws in place today, or when this area was populated that we have today, we wouldn't be sitting here. I live in Albany. If I dig down 18 inches, I hit river rock. A nice little 2 to 4 inch round river rock. It's all wetlands that we live in, and to have these onerous regulations from people who are not stakeholders, who don't live here, telling us how we can build and where we can build is ridiculous, and we need to work hard on getting the state and the federal government to back off so that communities can thrive in the format that they want to thrive in.
thank you.
I think what it comes down to is our state and national sovereignty. I've talked to a lot of people throughout Oregon that are really concerned about something called Agenda 21. I stand strongly against Agenda 21 myself because we need to get our land back. And we need to be able to use that land via the timber or whatever resources it has on it, to be able to use that freely to get our economies going, to be able to support our local schools, to be able to support our local economy. Right now, our land is being locked up. And this Agenda 21 is one of the culprits of it's basically interfering in our sovereignty. So as I said, I stand strongly against Agenda 21, and I advocate for getting our land back.
Thank you. Are there questions from the audience on this topic? Yes, sir.
What is this 21? I'm not familiar with it. I've never heard of it before.
Agenda 21 is it's a program that was started, I believe, in the early 90s down in Rio. I think it was the first Bush Senior went down to a conference, or one of his delegates went down there. And it's actually something run by the UN, the United Nations. And it's basically a program where it's all about control. That's what it kind of comes down to, is control. Control of your land, control of your life, control of this and control of that. And that, in America here, that's not what we're about. We're about freedom, and we're about state and national sovereignty, and that's something we need to protect based on what's in our U.S. Constitution.
Yes, sir.
Timber industry. My family's been involved in that all my life.
You're going to have to speak
Oh,
up.
excuse me, the timber industry. Unfortunately, the federal government owns more land in the state of Oregon than individual property owners do. And that seems to be one of our biggest problems with our economic timber values that we have in timber. There's more standing timber today in Oregon than there was in 1970, guaranteed. And we can't cut it. And we have sawmills that are shutting down, wages that are being lost. The most recent one is the one in, down by you.
Ready.
Rough and Ready, yes, thank you. And it's just terrible. It's a terrible thing. But how do we get control of our land? How do we get it back from the federal government? How do we buy it back?
So one of the issues that's being dealt with is the amount of land that is controlled by the federal government. Kansas has 1% of their land mass, if you take all of Kansas, that's federal land, and that includes post offices. Nebraska has 2%. North Dakota has 3% of their land mass that's federal property. Oregon has 53%. And this is money, this is land that we're not developing or collecting taxes on, and I'm not saying that it all should be developed. That's not the point. The point is, who should be making these decisions? Should it be the state or should it be the federal government? When states were originally created, the federal government held land in trust until the states could get up and running. That's why Kansas has 1%. After they were made a state, the land control, except for those pieces that the federal government needed to maintain, were they were transferred to state control. And so there was a change decades ago that has left the western United States in the situation that it's in, and it's not an easy solution to deal with in Congress, because they can't even balance a budget, let alone deal with this. But it's something that has to be addressed because our assets are not being utilized. We have greater forest fire risk because of failure to manage. And I mean, in Portland, we have we buy electric cars and hybrids and ride bikes and ride the Max and compost. And why do we do that? Because it is the things that we can do to help lessen the carbon footprint. But without a statewide natural resource policy, one forest fire in southern Oregon nullifies all that is being done in Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington County. So we need a natural resource policy that deals with private land use and public interest, and they have to be balanced. It's not one or the other. But it needs to be done in a way that is good for the entire state. And we passed laws, I think it was 1973 that we had Senate Bill 100, and it needs to be revisited periodically to see whether or not the intent is being met or have circumstances changed. I mean, we're certainly a much more agrarian state back then than we are now. And so there needs to be periodic review of the laws that we have and the policies to determine whether or not they're meeting the needs of all of Oregon. Any other comments on this issue before we go to the next? Yes?
So for the federal land...
May I ask if you have a question, would you please stand up because there's people in the back that are hearing impaired.
Okay then, so you could argue that the federal land is being owned mostly by the government because they're trying to hold up to environmental standards. So do you think that it'd have a better job of the federal government of keeping up, because obviously the environment is important to a state like Oregon. Could you argue that private landowners could do a much better job than the government?
Okay, so the question is, would private landowners do a better job than the federal government? Well, since the federal government is not doing anything, they may or may not. The real question is, who should be making that determination? And I'm not saying that it should be all private. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that the states should have that power because all of the powers not enumerated in the Constitution, meaning not given to the federal government, are reserved to the state and the people. And it should be the legislature and the governor, the elected officials who will work together to determine what the policy should be for the state of Oregon on most property.
There's one other thing. In the Constitution, it's very clear. It says that the land owned by the federal government will be 10 square miles, which is to be given by some collective states, which we today know as Washington, D.C., and land that is enough for military use. It's spelled out. It says that is all that is supposed to be owned by the federal government. So the mere fact that the federal government illegally, in my opinion, owns 51% of the federal force. I mean, over there in Central Oregon, there's federal grasslands. Why? It doesn't make sense, and it would be better in control of the state and in the private population combined, I think.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next question, which is for Mark, and it is dealing with government surveillance and personal freedom.
Good question. Well, as we all know, NSA is spying on us. Well, they may not think that we know that, but we know that. And they're encroaching in our lives. I mean, a lot of this has come out in recent days with Snowden, as you know. And I personally don't want the government encroaching in my life. I mean, I want my privacy, I want my freedom. And it's just that simple for me. I mean, right now, what NSA and other government agencies are doing, it violates our Fourth Amendment. And we're supposed to be secure in our papers and effects. And right now, we're not secure in our papers and effects because we have a government that wants to encroach upon our lives, wants to know who we are, what we're doing, every single minute of the day. And that's not what our country was founded upon. Our country was founded upon freedom. Our country was founded to be a constitutional republic 237 years ago. And what we've become in terms of these government agencies spying on us and encroaching on our freedom is something that is not right, and it's wrong and it's evil. And we need to take back our freedom, we need to take back our government. And so in terms of the government surveillance on us, yeah, they try to justify it saying that they're going to give us a measure of safety and security, but as Ben Franklin said, paraphrasing, of course, you should not have to trade safety and security for freedom, or vice versa, actually is what it was. But because you'll have neither in the end. If you trade your freedom for security, you're not going to have either. So that's just my take on it.
Okay, thank you. Others who would like to comment on this? Kim Todd?
I would just like to say that I think each one of us where we are can be proactive in speaking up, and we need to do that to guard the liberty that we have. My favorite example is Sheriff Mueller in Lynn County. When the federal government was pushing law enforcement on the gun issues, he wrote a letter to Vice President Biden, and he said, in my county, in Lynn County, we will not enforce laws that violate the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens in our county. And of course, that went all over the United States. A lot of sheriffs then joined in with him. But it's a simple thing that he did that had huge consequences and outreach. And so I think that's inspiring for all of us to do.
Thoughts or comments or questions? Yes. Would you please stand for us?
I'm just concerned that when we have a federal government that's willing to do things that are already illegal, what is it that we can actually do as a people to protect ourselves? We're not working within the bounds of a system of legal things. These are things that are taking place that are not acceptable. How can we deal with that as voters, as community members, and as our representatives?
So Ray, can you answer that?
I can answer that. Elect me to the United States Senate.
Single-handed, by golly.
We've got to work throughout every state to start getting elected officials who, number one, will abide by their oath of office, stand behind the Constitution of the United States and what it says, and stop violating it. They violate so much of the Constitution based on their voting records. And we've got to be active. Those of you that are here, you are active. You are part of that patriot spirit. When this country was founded, approximately 20% of the population wanted to leave the monarchy. 20% was loyal to the crown. 60% were apathetic. You are part of that 20% remnant patriot spirit. That's why you're here. If you weren't part of that, you wouldn't be here, you wouldn't care. But it's getting other people to join with you and say, look, we're losing our freedom. It is being slowly eroded away. You're losing your freedom of the right to free speech, of practicing your religion, etc.
Thank you. Bill, you got that?
You made me think of something. You mentioned patriotism, and you're right. To be a patriot used to mean to be for country. Today, the term patriot has been confused to mean nationalism by many people, and there's a huge difference. As you pointed out, those loyal to the crown versus those that cared about their country. And so in terms of the security issue and the NSA and government surveillance, I think to answer your question is we all have to get involved. Each one of us has to take a stand. And it's not just this issue, I realize, but what we can do is, in addition to electing folks that will represent us well, is we can take a stand. That means risk, right? That means risk. It doesn't mean adding at the bottom of your email, hi NSA, that's not good enough. We actually have to take a stand on these issues and say that it is important to protect our privacy. And I think when we start to realize that each of us has to be involved in taking that stand, then the tides will shift. And right now, it's so easy for people to say, the government's too big, there's no point in me getting involved, there's nothing I can do, and it's simply not true. Every one of you here has and can make a huge difference. You have no idea how much what you say on a day-to-day basis to other people around you makes a difference, even though you think it had no impact. So it's very important that we get involved.
Other thoughts? I would like to comment on this because this is a very challenging balance. It's easy to say, by golly, we're being watched too much and we just need to stop all of that. But it's not new. It's only been recently disclosed. I mean, there's been programs called Echelon around for a long time where certain words spoken would have consequences because of the concern for the safety and well-being of our country. We have, it's just been expanded in a lot of ways. The justification on one side is we want to make sure that the people of America are safe, and so we are scanning, watching for terrorists and terrorism, and in that zeal, we have gone to a point where we're not only watching for terrorism, but we're watching and recording everything that's being said in certain media, including what's going on with the leaders of other countries, and not just countries that have terrorist connections, but our friends as well. So you have this balance between that part of it, wanting to be secure and crossing the line, and then the other side saying we do not want to have anyone watching or violating our personal communications. And so there has to be this balance. I think the FISA courts, for those of you that are familiar, they're supposed to, before there's a violation of rights, we have special courts that are supposed to evaluate what's being done. Now, that has become much less of a protection for the people in recent years. It used to be that you would have certain judges who would be trusted to make sure that we don't, as a government, cross the line and unnecessarily violate the rights of the individuals. We need, as people, to be engaged in this, when we're talking to those that are running for national office, ask them where they stand, what will they do to help ensure that we define what that line is, and that we have oversight by those that can be trusted who are not part of the security system of the government, to ensure that the rights of the people are protected and balanced against the protection and security that we need as people. It is not easy to do. Right, let's go to our next question. Environment, jobs, and the economy. Bill, would you like to address this?
Oh my.
Simple.
Yeah, sure.
Would you like to begin the discussion?
No. But my experience as a person like you in the economy is what matters most. Do I have money? Do I have income for the students? Am I going to have an opportunity when I get out of school based on all this time and effort and money that I put in, or borrowed in a lot of cases? And when I look at the community that I live in, I see the effects of the economy, and it's, Dennis hit it on it earlier, and several of us have, and that is simply there's an attitude towards the economy that is not sustainable right now, given our current government. And that is that all of us would say that when income is down or when the economy is hurting, we would tighten our belts. any organization, whether it's government or private business, wants to grow. It's just an inherent desire within any group of people. And when you're in business, you have that profit element that allows you to grow. If you make a profit, if you do well, if you provide a good service and a good product, you're going to grow. The problem is that we have the same mentality in government right now, which is we need to grow, regardless of what the economy is doing. In fact, maybe even more when the economy is not doing well. More food stamps, as you mentioned earlier. It's counterintuitive to what growth should be. Growth should be based on success. And so when the economy is not doing well, the government should cut back. And so in our own community, and this is small scale compared to the state, but in our own community, we haven't raised taxes. We've provided higher levels of service by simply being more efficient, finding ways to reduce costs, getting more people involved in the community, in a way, for example, in volunteer roles. And we've managed to keep our community, our local economy, if you will, very local economy, going by having a proper and realistic attitude towards spending and not increasing money just because the government needs it or claims to need it. So to me, it's really mostly a matter of an attitude towards with our government leaders, which I know that no one at this table would do, and that is they would not say we need to raise taxes, we need to spend more money in order to help the economy. It just does, it's circular logic. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Okay. Others? Senator.
Thank you. I was reading last week about a Rasmussen poll that was done recently about the Keystone Pipeline. And I thought it was interesting that the poll found that 56% of likely U.S. voters think that the pipeline will be good for the U.S. economy. And I think that's interesting because I think people are realizing that without jobs and without revenue for our state government, we cannot provide the services that we're providing. So I think that's a signal to us in government to try to maintain that balance between a healthy environment, using our resources, but using them wisely and being good stewards. One thing we're doing right now, we're working with DEQ Senator Alan Olson and Sherry Springer, representing Springer, to come up with a fiscal advisory committee within Department of Environmental Quality, where they're going to look at the effect of their regulations, or change in regulations, on industry and on jobs and on the economy. And so they actually set up a committee that's going to meet in Portland, and it has both environmental groups and members of industry on that committee. So I think that's a good first step for balance to maintain our quality of life as well as our environment.
Yes.
So, I mean, kind of one of the big issues that a lot of students see is, I mean, they want jobs after they graduate from college, but the problem is there aren't jobs. So what happens a lot of time is students graduate and then they just keep on going to school, add another degree, and they think that'll improve their prospects of getting on a job, but in the end they have thousands of dollars more in debt and still no job prospects. I mean, I hear all the time the state governments, let's try to get more funding for school, let's try to get more kids to go to school, but there's been very little talk of what happens after they're done with school.
Good. Thoughts on it, Joe?
Every time the government, and I'll pick on Earl Blumenauer, last month said we need to raise the federal gas tax by 15 cents to go from 18 to 15 cents. Well, that's great. 18 and add another 15 cents. Sorry, I said that backwards. And add another 15 cents. Well, that 15 cents a gallon of gas takes money out of your pocket. And if that money's coming out of your pocket to go to a federal bureaucracy or any bureaucracy that can't manage the money they have to start off with, that's 15 cents less, or let's call it, it's only $1.50 on 10 gallons, $3 on 20 gallons. Well, how many miles do you drive? It can add up to a lot of money. And that's money that you can't spend on the economy. So we end up in this catch-22 situation. We've got to cut back regulations that have made it hard for businesses to build. In Albany, 4 years before Lowe's got approval from the city council to build. 4 years. That was in 2010 that they finally got approval. They broke ground in 2013. So it took 3 more years to get permits after they got approval. Part of the reason, there was a wetlands permit on that land where a creek went through part of the property because of a low spot in the land, okay? Well, the previous owner had the wetlands permit. It expired in the process of the ownership changing hands. So they had to go through all of the state land use laws again, which goes to the environment, which goes to the economy, which goes to jobs. So here's a lot of jobs in construction, plus the employment of those people that eventually will work at Lowe's to help people that will take their money to go buy home improvement things. And you know, we've got to start reversing this catch-22. It's going to come back down to reducing the regulation so that more people will create jobs and cut back taxes, not raising them.
Thank you.
I just have 2 words regarding this question, free and market. I'm a big free market supporter myself. And when I was going here to Oregon State, I delivered pizza for a Pizza Hut that was down here on 4th and Harrison. I don't know if it's still there or not, but I came home every night smelling like a pepperoni pizza. Yeah, but I was earning what I got because I valued it more. That's just how I was raised. In terms of the environment, what we have right now going on at the federal level is cronyism. We have cronyism going on in terms of spending big government money in projects that the free market can't support. And I say, sure, support the environment, yes, but there has to be free market support for it. In terms of jobs in the economy, we need to get government out of our lives. As Dennis alluded to earlier in his speech, there's just so many regulations in our government, both at the federal and state level, and even at the local level, that are preventing businesses from starting in the first place. It's squelching entrepreneurship. We need to get the government out of our lives, and I'm a big advocate for limited government in the free market.
Might say, just kind of a way of background, when you're talking about environment, jobs, and the economy, let's go back and look at what the relationship is. The economy is, you know, the economic well-being of our state. When it's growing, that means jobs are created, and you have people coming out of high school, out of college, that are moving into the area, and they can get a job. You have people that are retiring, but with a growing economy, you have more jobs created than just filling those that are vacated by somebody that's retiring. To create a growing economy, you have to have profit. Profit is the difference between what a business or a person invests in their business, whatever it might be, and what they get paid for it. It's assuming that you actually make more than what you're spending, right? And so if you want to invest, say you want to have your own kiosk, and you're young, you're excited, you want to do this, and so you arrange to get enough money to get the basic start for your business. You're going to have the kiosk itself, you need advertising, you need to make sure that you qualify for the permits and that you're safe and all of those things. You're investing in this business, and then you market it. And you want to sell more of whatever it is you're selling at a price that's higher than what you're paying for it. That's profit. To expand an economy, you have to have profit. You have to have more money coming in that's going out. When you have leadership that is essentially thinking, well, let's see, my life has been collecting a check that's been either directly or indirectly paid by taxpayers, and so what I really need is just more money from the taxpayers so that I can redistribute it to other people. They do not understand that our economy and its success is based on people that are willing to take a risk and be able to generate resources or revenue from it. And when you have an economy that's growing, you're selling your products to other states and other countries. We're exporting products so that we can get money into our economy. And in Oregon, we want to do that with a sincere respect for the environment. When I first got here, there was a term called "Don't Californicate Oregon." I thought, that's graphic. And it is. because it's talking about what was being done down there with urban sprawl, and if you had a piece of land that was beautiful, there was how many lots can we carve this into and how much money can we make, without any real consideration for what the consequences are long term for that. Well, that was then. California now, that pendulum has swung way back, and now they have leadership that seems to think that you don't have to be able to generate a booming economy, and if it wasn't for their climate and their influx of immigrants from all over the world, they'd be in even worse trouble than they're in. But we can learn from other places. Oregon needs to have this balance between our quality of life, which is important, maintaining an environment that is beautiful and is healthful. We all want clean air. We all want clean water. We want places to go on the weekends. We want to be able to hike and ride our bikes and see the beauty. That's Oregon. But we also need to respect the fact that people have to make a living. And so we need to promote an environmentally friendly way to expand our economy. That's currently not happening. That needs to take place. And if we do that, we will be answering the environment balanced with the need for jobs and have a vibrant economy. Next is Common Core. Joe Ray, would you introduce this subject for us?
Common Core. Well, as one of my wonderful other Senate candidates likes to call it a socialist agenda, which it is. I'll attribute that to Mark. Every time, Mark and I are, we tend to like, one of these days we might actually carpool, except for we like to keep the economy going and spending money on gas. So, Common Core is an idea that every student learns at the same pace. I talked to a Republican school board member up in Washington County, Multnomah County, a couple months ago, and he was for Common Core, and this was why. He said, well, if there's a student, let's say he's in the 3rd grade, and they're going to school in Portland, Oregon, and the family moves to Little Rock, Arkansas, and it's the 3rd week in January, he can go right into his brand new little 3rd grade classroom and pick up right there, not miss a beat. Well, it sounds really good on the surface. There's a couple of problems. You've got cultural differences, environmental differences. Children learn at different paces. But it's more of a dumbing down of America. The students are learning less and less. One of my concerns, they have to rewrite the SATs. These students, what they are not teaching them today, in a few years from now, will not be able to pass today's SAT exams. Will not be possible. They are teaching them math like this, 9 and 7. We know it's 16. Student answers at 17. Well, Johnny, how did you get 17? Well, I added these two numbers together. Johnny, you did the method the right way. You get credit. I'm sorry. Johnny's wrong. How's he going to be able to do chemistry? How's he going to be able to do engineering? How's he going to go into pharmacy or be a doctor or figure out change with that, working in a store? They are teaching children little things like the president is to be obeyed at all times. That's in some of the literature put out by persons. One of the biggest education people out there, textbook providers. The Common Core is not good, and you've got to start getting involved. You've got to get involved at the school board level. If you are retired, get on the school boards and start pushing against this. If you're still not retired, you're still in college, go to the school board meetings. Get involved. Get on your school boards and start making noise. This is tomorrow's future. These are tomorrow's leaders. And it's Mao and Stalin, and they all went after the youth. We see it today. It's even worse with Common Core.
You have some thoughts on this, Tom?
So I actually served on Alaska State Board of Education, and one of the prime examples against kind of federal government interference was this teacher brought before us a question that was on a federal exam. And the question was, what is food? Had a picture of a book, a seal, and broccoli. So coming from Alaska with a lot of indigenous Native American students, they all checked seal as food. yeah, as their food. Probably have never seen broccoli. And so it's like, you have the federal government, someone in Washington DC, some bureaucrat, that's obviously the right answer, and we're gonna make that the standard for everyone. And so it's like, different states have different education standards and have different needs.
Thank you.
Well, I can tell you that I strongly stand against Common Core. As Joe Ray said, I've actually testified at my local school board up in Salem, Salem Kaiser School Board. There's some videos online if you'd like to look them up on my website. But as I say, Common Core is evil. I mean, we got to call a duck here. Common Core is evil. Yeah. Yeah, a beaver.
He's from Eugene, you gotta
Yeah. I grew up in Eugene, but I went to school here at Oregon State. But yeah, I mean, so I'm kind of a platypus, I guess. But anyway, yeah, Common Core is evil. I mean, I call it Commie Core myself. But I mean, the point is, I got skin in the game here. My daughters are over here with me here today. They're 9 and 11, they're 4th and 5th grade. And I've been going to these parent meetings, I've been going to these school board meetings, and it's like you get up there, you have your 3 minutes of fame, you give them a public comment, they roll your eyes at that, and then they have you sit down. And we need to do something about this, because nowhere in the Constitution does it say anything about a national education system or upholding the national education standards, or even international education standards for it in the first place. I challenge our legislators this year to actually come up with a bill to repeal Common Core state standards. I know it was passed in the legislature back in 2009, but we need to get rid of it because it's not what our country's about. It's not about freedom. It's about a social agenda, a socialist agenda, or communist agenda, in my opinion, that does not belong in our schools.
You have a comment?
Just that I concur, it's the federalization of education. And we've seen this really for 30 years, program after program, that we want local control. That's one of the strengths of our country, is local control in elected school board.
Thank you.
Just briefly to add to what Senator Close just said, speaking in broad terms, I'm not going to talk about anything specific with Common Core, but I think it's symptomatic of an underlying problem, and that is that one approach to solving problems in the world is to try to centralize and standardize and control. Another approach is to have local control and local systems and local programs that are then coordinated across the country. You know, in the 50s and the 40s, the United States had none of this, this idea of centralizing and standardizing everything, and we were the world's leading country educationally. We did it without any of this. Do we have to coordinate our systems and our educational programs? Yes. But as far as possible, it should be done at the government closest to the people is best.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think it's not only whether it's a core education system or not, but the quality of teachers and the relationship between the students and the teachers as well. Nowadays, the teacher looks like they are afraid to tell what's right, what's wrong, and it's more important to be politically correct and keep the relationship, and that's not true all the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I was going to say that the Heartland Institute of Chicago collects and every week sends a newsletter. The last one I received this week had perhaps 20 items that related to where Common Core is and where it is being confronted by the United States. If anyone in the room wishes to receive that, all you have to do is sign on to Heartland Institute, and a whole list of choices that you can make for information that you can receive. One is Common Core, another is school choice, and in addition they have other items. Otherwise, I'd be more than happy to send that link to Dennis Richardson and let him distribute that. I'd also note too that someone who's very, very close to this issue told me here within the last 2 weeks that right now The barrier that we are trying to reach is if we can acquire 10 states who will absolutely reject and refuse to participate in the Common Core project, we can overcome it. That's enough momentum for us to basically stop the complete standardization of our K through 12 education systems. So right now, my take is Heartland Institute is one of the best. I've also got other documentation that I'll send because there are some people who were very, very significantly behind this. There are articles about the support by Bill Gates and some of his organizations, and so I think we really must understand the basis for a lot of this and then get the day-to-day activities of what's taking place.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so, excuse me, it sounds like, we're talking about centralization, standardization, dumbing down of education. And I was curious to hear your thoughts on, the consolidation we're seeing here in our state as, the Kitzoffer's administration is doing with dissolving the Oregon University system and consolidating it under the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, having universities and community colleges lumped together, and even further going K through 20 with the Oregon Education Investment Board and trying to clump all those together and centralize them under the executive, and maybe even enshrining that in the Constitution. I was curious what your thoughts are, because I'm slightly concerned with some of it.
Thank you. It's fascinating to watch what happens over history, because if you look at states and their education systems, there's about a 30-year trend. And that is, you'll say, you know what, we need to standardize. What we really need is a strong chancellor, because we have multiple campuses, we've got a lot of duplication of effort, and by golly, we need to have some consolidation so that we can save money and know what's happening and make things work better. And then some 25, 30 years later, you'll hear, you know what, we need independence. We need independent boards. We need to be able to control our own destiny. We've got our own alumni, and we need to do this. And so we have this swing toward University of Oregon and the other major universities being able to have their own independent boards now. The smaller universities are very concerned about that, because they say, now wait a second, because they've got the alumni, they've got the money, what's going to happen to us? And that's they're being left kind of hanging out right now, because that's undetermined in Oregon. The concept of having a coordinated effort in our state, so that if you go to community college in Rogue Valley and you want to go to PSU for university, the credits that you earn in a community college in Oregon should be accepted toward a degree in a university that's also funded by the state. You students have seen this or have heard about this before, where you've taken a class and it's not accepted somewhere else, or that you need a class to graduate, but I'm sorry, we don't offer it right now. Well, if it's offered in another place, why wouldn't you be able to take it from another university or college in our state? So coordination for the benefit of the students, to ensure that you get a good education as economically and as efficiently and effectively and quickly as you can handle it, that all makes sense. But we need to constantly say and ask the question, how does this affect the students? How does this meet our core goal, which is to provide education for the kids? Not maintain greater power, more control, expand the bureaucracy, expand more administration. It's about what's going on in the classrooms and how are we facilitating the finest instructors reaching the largest number of Oregon students in the most efficient manner. And so the question you ask is actually kind of complicated, because we're a little schizophrenic, because at this point we're going to independence, independent boards, but there's also consolidation taking place. And so as governor, just my comment is that I want to have key educators, and by the way, Common Core, if you look at its origin, it's not being organized by the finest teachers in the world or in the country. It's, what's the basis for it? Follow the money, follow the attitudes, and you'll learn a lot about what's going on. Don't always listen to the sales pitch, read the fine print. And so then you know what's really happening. And so in Oregon, in our higher education, we need to be evaluating what is really working in other places. I firmly believe that every problem Oregon faces is being successfully solved somewhere. And so we can learn from the successes and the failures in higher education, in other states, in other nations, and refocus our efforts to ensure that we have the finest, economical, efficient, and effective education in higher education in Oregon. That can be done. I could give you the PERS question, but I think I probably will give you the other question. The next to last question is national health care and limited government.
So I mean, national health care has kind of been a big thing with Obamacare, failed rollout and an even worse rollout with Cover Oregon. And the problem is the administration hasn't even been releasing numbers on how many young people have been registering, and they claim, oh, we don't know that, but you know someone's got in their office a chart with how many young people, because that's critical to Obamacare succeeding.
Okay, good. Other thoughts on it?
Well, may I just suggest that on Channel 2 News in Portland, they have an investigative tab on their website, and that's very interesting, what they've been doing, interviewing the governor.
Yes. Good. You have thoughts? National health care, so why don't you...
Full repeal. That's what we need. Full repeal of Obamacare. Obamacare is socialism. I'll just keep it short and sweet and call it what it is. We need full repeal. It's not something that the government should be doing in the first place. I don't want government in my life. So anything less than full repeal is not acceptable. And we need to get our country back here, folks. We need to get our freedom back. Obamacare is an interference in that freedom. So that's why I advocate for full repeal. In terms of limited government, yeah, I'm a limited government guy. I don't want government in my life, and I'm assuming you guys don't want government in your life either. So I'm a big advocate of limited government. But as I said, in terms of national health care, it's a boondoggle. Even here in Oregon, the Oregon version of Obamacare, Kids Care, or what my team has other names for it, but it's socialism, and it's not what our country's about. It's not what our state is about, and I advocate for full repeal of national health care.
1/6 of the economy. 1/6 of the federal economy. It's a lot of money. Can't afford it. And to say that, oh, that's okay, the federal government is going to subsidize the premiums. Well, who's the federal government? Where do they get their money? This is supposed to be a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And people go, well, there's no solutions out there. Folks, we've all had access to the best health care that there is. I have not had health insurance since 2009. My husband has had to go to the doctor. I've gone to the doctor. We self-pay. You can get catastrophic care insurance, well, you could before January 1st. You can get catastrophic care, pay a higher deductible, bank the difference, and save the money. Pay your deductible out of pocket and choose. We need to be able to buy it across state lines. We need to have a menu on my car insurance, on your car insurance. You can decide what's your deductible going to be. Are you going to have comprehensive and collision? What kind of personal, if it's paid off. Personal property protection. We automatically have to have an insured motorist, but do we want towing? Do we not want towing? How many days of rental car do I want to have covered? That's the kinds of things, but to have an insurance or the government mandate that you've got to pay for maternity. I'm 57 years old. I'm not planning on any more babies. And neither's my husband. So and many of you, you're at that age. You're going, God, we're not Abraham and Sarah. We're not having children at 90 plus years old out here, okay? It's just the way it is. Why should we be paying for it? And then they have the youth say, well, you guys have got to buy into it, but oh, well, wait a minute, don't worry about it. Your parents are going to cover you until you're 26 years old. I just talked to a lady today who got signed up, did their paperwork in November. They just finally got their information, but oh, by the way, their 22-year-old son who's in college isn't covered on their plan here in Oregon. And she's going, I thought he was supposed to be covered till he's 26. Explain that one to me. It is such a mess. We've got to stop, don't buy it. I don't even know what it's gonna be doing to Medicare. I haven't gotten that far yet, because we know at some point Medicare is gonna be affected. The bottom line is it's designed to fail, it's not designed to succeed. It's designed to either collapse our economy and/or get us on the single payer tax, healthcare system. I think it's the former.
Okay, thank you. Mayor?
Boy, I look at this and I think another symptom of erosion of our rights. And in fact, you know, it's curious to me that Republicans are seen as obstructionists, that somehow we don't want to, that we don't support health care for all, which is absolutely not the case. You know, when you're a parent and you try to stop your child from touching the burning stove, are you an obstructionist? When we continue to go down this path and there's a group of people that said, hey, we don't want to go over the cliff, but there's another way. We can get there without going over the cliff. We have to rephrase all of this. Yes, everyone should have health care. Is it a right? Is health care a right? I'm not going to answer the question. You know, to me, and I know a lot of you believe the same thing, I'm looking more at the systemic aspect of these things, but rights are given by God. Government cannot give rights, it can only take them away. And when we allow the economy to be controlled by government, this portion of our economy, we will allow the government to make healthcare decisions or be involved in healthcare decisions. We allow intrusion into our lives. And when we say that the folks that are trying to slow it down or stop it or move in a more healthy direction are obstructionists, we're just redefining terms. And so we need to get away from, and I'm sorry, I just say one more thing. I don't know how many of you have heard Ben Carson speak, but there's something about one thing that he said that I am just completely fascinated with, and that is this idea that we've allowed ourselves to stop speaking out due to political correctness. Political correctness controls us now. And this is, when we allow the government to take over our lives like this, and we don't speak out against it because we're afraid we won't be politically correct, then we've already given up part of our soul. We've got to, the individual mandate, think about it. The requirement that you buy something, historically unique, never been done before. You have to buy something. What a concept. The government's going to tell you have to buy something. There's no choice, you don't have any choice in it. Anyway, we've got to, as you said, we've got to call what it is, and we've got to speak with the voice of reason. But I would say that there's one thing that we all have to do, and this is, I'm not running for anything, but I'm encouraging the candidates here. Well, and that is find your voice, and don't allow political correctness to hold you back. And I don't think any of you will. And let's get back to doing what's right for the American people instead of continuing to go down that path of concession.
Finding the voice is very, very important. We must speak out and speak clearly about how we feel. I mean, we have this entire proceedings being photographed or videotaped, and it will be utilized by those that would like to see those of us running for office not be successful. But that doesn't mean that you avoid issues that you must speak on. National health care is not working well in other states. The European model is having tremendous difficulties. If you read what's going on in England right now, they're now revamping their whole structure because it's not financially sustainable. Canada's having difficulty. What is often not discussed is how effective it is for preventative care. And in some of these countries, they'll even send a taxi to come and get you, to take you in for tests and so forth. But from a political standpoint, let's see, we got 200,000 whatevers, and we're gonna spend it, and we can share it on 5,000 healthy people, then they're voters. And we will be held in high esteem, and we will stay in office. Or we could spend that entire amount on one person who's a little older and really sick. Maybe that person has to get in the queue and see how long it's going to take before they can get the expensive treatment for cancer, for other things. Now, I understand that there is rationing takes place in many countries and in many ways. It often happens just because you have an inadequate amount of money to do all of the good that you want to do. I am not advocating rationing, nor would I ever do that, because I believe in a free market system. The best thing that we can do is try and, one, make sure that parents and patients, we need to make sure that patients and doctors have a relationship, that the government is not dictating who you can see and when you can see them. We need to ensure that the medical profession are adequately compensated. The doctors right now are fearful of Obamacare and kids care because they know it's financially unsustainable. And so what is going to happen when you put all these people onto the plan and you don't have enough money to pay for it? Where are you going to save? Well, we'll just cut down on the reimbursement rates to the doctors. And then the doctors say, no, wait a second, you know, you're paying 80% of what the cost is, now you're 70%. Where are you going to go? How low does it go? And then they say, you know what, we're going to stop taking these patients because we can't afford to provide the care. And so now, who's the bad guy? Government marketers say, these doctors need to be controlled. We need a greater control because they're not willing to treat the poor and the needy. They never discuss about the fact that the government that has the power to give has the power to take away. We need a system that's transparent so that patients can know what doctors are going to charge. I mean, we've driven the freeway that says MRI for $450. Well, there are cities where you can get an MRI for $450 or you can spend $1,150. But if somebody else is paying the tab, who cares? You see? It's like, well, our current system is like going to a restaurant, getting the menu, and there's no prices because you don't have to pay. And so you say, I think I'll take the steak and lobster. Now, if you were paying for it, maybe the salad and some soup and a lesser cut might be acceptable because you've got skin in the game. We need to get back to where people, the patients, have skin in the game, have an expectation of involvement. Now, those that are poor, that cannot pay, we must help ensure that they have medical care. But those that can pay something ought to be paying something. We ought to have greater freedom in our selection. I do not want the government saying that here's what the mandatory coverages are. Because then they say, this is a free system. Look at all these free enterprise insurance companies that are providing the coverage. And you say, yeah, but what coverage is? Well, they have to comply with all of these requirements given by well-meaning public servants. They mean to be good servants, but they mean to actually control what is being done because they think they know better for the people than what the people know. Okay? Joe has said that maybe we need to be able to buy insurance across borders. Well, why not? You know, I mean, you don't have to just buy car insurance from only a company that's only here. We need to be able to have greater freedom so that we can ensure that we have coverage that we want, that we're willing to pay for. And if we want to pay a lot of money, we can have prepaid medical care. Or if we want a high deductible because we think that's going to be wise, then we can pay less. But let us make the decision and not have it be made for us. That is what we need to have. And as youth, you need to have that freedom as well because the financial security and success of this whole program, state and federal, requires the fact or the hope that you are buying these policies and paying more than what you should be paying at your age so that the excess can be utilized for high cost for those of us that are older. Okay? It sounds great on paper, but it takes away from you the freedom to make choice. And so you need to have the right of choice related to your health care, but with an understanding that everyone needs to have access to health care. Thank you. on schedule. And the last question is PERS and balancing the Oregon budget. I saved that one because it's actually Donald and Ryan. In 2003, that was my first session in the legislature, and I was put onto the PERS Reform Committee. To let you know how naive I was, I volunteered for that. PERS is a huge problem. I wanted to get involved with this and help solve it. So I said, okay. And so they put me on this committee. Every night I was reading and studying, trying to figure out the public employee system because it's so complicated. It really, really is complicated. It's one of the, you have several levels in PERS. You have the current people that are working for the state are getting it's a little expensive, but it's not an outrageous benefit plan. It's tier 3. It's called OPSER, which is a silly acronym, but anyway, it's tier 3 PERS. Tier 2 was not as reasonable, but it wasn't as expensive as the old plan, tier 1. And tier 2 was from 1996 to 2003. And then tier 1 PERS is for people that were hired before January 1st of 1996. So I mean, these are old folks, right? But the cost is outrageous. And we're talking about people that never put a dime into their program, and if they worked for 30 years, if you went out to try and buy the coverage and benefits that they have, it's $1 million annuity. I mean, I've actually priced these things. And I won't go through all of the various benefits, but let me just say that it is a huge problem, and it affects every one of us in this room. Because the people that retire have a right to their contractual benefits. And the mere fact that they cost a fortune is not their problem. It's the state's problem. And so we have a governor who said, I will fix the PERS problem. Nobody says, well, wait a second. You were governor when we had a lot of these problems begin. So why don't we go back and say, why did you contribute and allow the government unions to influence the legislature, and you sign the dotted line as the governor when you're expanding the costs in ways that are unacceptable? Now, the governor also had involvement with tier 2 and so forth, but that, let me just suffice it to say that who does not want there to be a correction of benefits for public employees? The government unions, right? I mean, that is just the reality. I know many of the union leaders, nice people. They do a very good job in representing those with the card. As one was asked, when are you really going to help the kids? Talk about helping the kids, but the money just seems to go to the union's goals and those things. And he said, well, when the kids have a union card, of course. Of course. Okay. I didn't hear that. I heard that was stated back east. But the idea makes sense, right? If your job is to represent a group of people, and you do a good job with that, it's not focused on those that are not part of your responsibility. But the consequence is that we are cutting back on school days in some school districts. We lay off teachers. I mean, think of it this way. Currently in school districts, many of them are paying 25 to 27% of every dollar on wages. An additional 25 to 27 cents is going just to PERS. So if you need 5 teachers, how many can you afford with PERS? 4, right? Because the money that would go to the 5th is going to go to the PERS for the other 4. And about 40% of the PERS payments for people that are working presently are going to pay the benefits for people that are already retired. Now, in private areas, that's called a Ponzi scheme, right? Where you're taking money now to send it over here. But this is the way it is in PERS. And so how are we going to deal with that and balance the Oregon budget? And the answer is, when you have this kind of additional costs, there's a $13 billion unfunded actuarial liability. And so I don't want your eyes to, I'm watching to see it drop off. You're still with me. What it means is, a retirement plan is supposed to be fully funded, so that if you shut it down, there's enough money in the plan to pay for people's benefits that are calculated for over the rest of their life. Well, in Oregon, we were like $14 to $16 billion short. That's called an unfunded liability. It's not going to show up until years down the road because we have a lot of money right now, but it's going to show up. And so the governor needed to fix PERS. And I was involved in this with our governor and with the legislature, and I said, fix it now because you can. Only Democrats can adequately fix PERS, right? Because as soon as a Republican takes over, unions are going to say, it's just the Republican trying to take away our benefits. And so here was an opportunity to really fix PERS, but it's very difficult to do because the #1 contributor and assistants to get Democrats elected are the government unions. And so one of the legislators I worked with in 2003 was Greg McPherson, a very upstanding, excellent pension profit-sharing ERISA attorney at a large law firm in Portland. So we're on the same PERS committee. He's advocating for his plan. I'm advocating for a more rational, long-term plan for new employees. He ends up winning, and yet the things that he did were viewed by the unions as being so despicable because he did any reforms that when it came for him to run again, what do you think happened to him? Do you think he came back? No. And a few years later, he runs for Attorney General. Do you think he had a chance for Attorney General? No. Because he was a person that was being shown as a poster child to all of the Democrat legislators and others running for office. Don't cross the government unions or else we will take you out in the next primary by funding somebody to run against you. Now that kind of coercion is not the American way. It's certainly not the American spirit. And yet that's what we're facing. We need to have a PERS system that is affordable. We need to honor the contract, but not everything that the state legislature has given over the years is part of that contract. I mean, you know, can you imagine saying to the legislature, you can't raise my taxes because I've got a contract with you. I've been planning on getting this. Well, if there was actually a contract, that's one thing, but the government many times gives things and they take things away. And so there needs to be an evaluation of what is contractual and what isn't, and we need to make an adjustment so that we don't have so much money continuing to go for the PERS payments that are unnecessary, that are non-contractual, and have that money not going to education, to scholarships, to teachers, professors, to public facilities, to potholes, to libraries. You see, we cannot just continue this. But if you want something different, then you have to change those that are in charge of what is going forward. And I'm, you know, if this sounds like I'm campaigning, I certainly am. I say, if you don't like what you've been getting, don't keep voting the way you've been voting. So let's have a change. Let's do something else again. And let's work on balancing the budget, not by merely taking money from important high priority expenditures and shoveling that into PERS because we do not have the courage or the willpower or the intelligence or the unity to say we're going to send many options for change, and we'll send them in a bill up to the Oregon Supreme Court and let the Supreme Court decide which of these is contractual and which are not contractual, and just take the heat in doing this so that we honor the contract, but we stop spending money unnecessarily. But we need to honor our contracts. Anyway, that is my kind of introduction to this. We have a few minutes. Do we have any thoughts on it? I'll go out and then I'll come back. Yes, sir.
You started after I was in PERS. You're familiar with the term sweeping?
I'm not sure.
Sweeping in the political sense.
Sweeping.
This is what happened to PERS. It's the same thing that happened to Social Security. Sweeping is where the government goes and says, they've got a fund. We need it.
Okay.
You lose it.
That works in Social Security, it doesn't work in
It did
PERS.
work in PERS, I'm sorry, but it did. It's
Well-
what happened before you even stepped up there.
Yeah, my understanding was that we did that once, and then it went to court, and the court ordered to get paid back. with
Yes,
interest.
because you can't do that.
Yeah.
See, I have, as the executive director of Bike Pack, we years ago started a fund for the motorcycling community for safety and awareness programs.
Mm-hmm.
We've been threatened more than once to have that money swept. It goes to support Team Oregon, the finest teaching facility in the United States. And I'm not just saying that because it's Team Oregon, but because it's
If you want to
true.
be certified to ride motorcycles in Oregon, Team Oregon does training to help ensure that you're safe and prepared.
Yes, they are very good. I've critiqued them on an individual level as well. But the money was swept back in the early 90s from PERS, and they were told to pay it back. That's where the problem comes. When you sweep money, suddenly it's not there, you have a problem paying it back because you don't have the extra revenue coming in.
Yeah, that was a tough thing to pay it back, but you're absolutely right. That happened, but it was required that it get paid back because
Yes.
PERS in Oregon, I mean, it is a government trust fund. I mean, you know, it is a retirement trust fund. Sweeping in budgets, which happens fairly regularly when your co-chairs of Ways and Means and others say, we need more money. Where are some pools of money around? And they say, well, you know, we can take a little of this and a little of this, sweep it into to help meet our current needs as we define them, instead of lowering the needs and living within our means. Yes?
Yeah, so I've been a member of the Oregon State University Budget Committee for the last 2 years, and that's the committee that dictates tuition rates. And day one, we sat down and they presented us with the cost drivers of higher education, and the number one cost driver was, of course, PERS. So our Democratic friends tend to say, you know, let's just throw taxpayer money at it to relieve the situation. I want to know what y'all think the Republican answer is. What's the message the Republican Party should send to students on fighting the cost drivers of higher education?
Okay, now, let's deal with that a little bit later. If you're going beyond PERS,
No,
and we're talking about general.
PERS specific.
Okay, PERS, yes, what it is?
Oh, not on PERS specifically.
Okay, all right, so let's stay on PERS until we're done with this, okay? Thoughts?
I think the public should know that, at least in the Senate caucus, we did run all of this by attorneys who told us which of the 10 things that we had come up with were contractual and were not contractual. And a number of the things in PERS, as Representative Richardson said, are not contractual. The money match is not. Actually, the COLA is not. But the court found, the Supreme Court in 2003 found that because it had been given for so many years, that that was unconstitutional, but it is not actually in the contract. So a lot of this has to be worked out in the courts. I thought it was an interesting idea that I read about recently, that the federal government could actually, because this is a problem all across the United States, the public pensions are underfunded across the country, and the feds could not allow states to sell bonds unless they had their pension system funded and solvent. So those of you running for federal offices, how about it?
She has a really good point. It needs to be disclosed. People need to know where this is at. You can't just have PERS be kind of off budget. We have a right to know where our state stands by having that not be just something that's over here separate, but it's part of the cost of doing business. It's a debt that we have, and so there needs to be greater disclosure so that we are forced to address it. Other thoughts? Okay.
Yeah. So, as a former financial advisor, I actually assisted several of my now former clients with rolling over their PERS money. One of the things that we found, especially under the Tier 1, and it was the Tier 1, they got an 8% guaranteed return on their investment. Folks, if you go to the, and if they're still working and they're still in Tier 1, they still got that 8% guarantee on their money pre-retirement. Okay, once they're retired, it's a fixed income the way that it's set up. If you take money today and you go get a certificate of deposit, which for you younger folks, you're giving your money to the bank for a specified period of time and they're going to give you so much interest, you're going to be lucky to get 1%. For banks to break even, they have to make 3% minimum on interest that they take in. But the state is paying out 8%. There's a saying that I learned back in 1986, when your inflow exceeds your outflow, your upkeep becomes your downfall. There's a small problem with PERS. Now, Detroit, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Stockton, California. Those 3 cities have all filed bankruptcy. Every one of those, it's because of the unfunded and now coming due liabilities for their public employee retirement systems. This is a critical issue. This is not a minor issue. I think it's time that we start getting some people at the state level that have the guts to start telling the unions, we're not going to negotiate with you on this. Why in the world, I'm going to pick on the city of Albany because that's where I live. Why in the world does the city employee who takes my check when I go in there to make my water payment, why does she need a union? I asked somebody that, you know what they told me? So she doesn't get fired. If she's not doing her job, folks, she needs to get fired. And that's the bottom line. The unions want people to be there because they get their dues. And they make all these promises, and Dennis was absolutely right. They care about the people that are there today. They don't care about the children. They don't do it for the children. They do it for the power. And money is power. Follow the money. We can't afford 8%. I'm glad at least they've got what looks more like a 401k plan, which is the tier 3 plan. But this has got to get addressed. And it's not going to get addressed underneath the current regime.
And there has been a minor adjustment. I think it's now 7.75%.
Oh, good job. Okay. I'm glad to hear that. All right.
Step in the right direction. Anyway, you know, at this point, it's 10 minutes till, and we've discussed each of the areas. There's so much more that could be said, but we don't need to have everybody to say it. You know, it's like the old idea, well, everything's been said, but not everybody has said it. I think that we actually have covered these issues as best we can today. If nothing else, we hope that we awaken in your thoughts that these are really important issues and they affect you. Was it Perkins that said, you may not care about government, but government cares about you? What is done in the state and in Washington, D.C. has a direct impact on you and your families and your future. So be involved, be informed, be connected, and be heard. Thank you very much for being here.
We are so grateful to this panel for your expertise, your insight, your thoughts. Many of us here have never had the opportunity to hear this type of discussion on issues that are central to our well-being. Panel, thank you. Let's go one more hand. I would like to say that it costs a lot of money to run a campaign. It's not cheap, everything from the cars, the gasoline that's involved, the people that you need to have there to make a campaign work. I believe in Dennis Richardson. I believe that we need Dennis Richardson as our next governor. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I was talking to Dennis a few months ago about his experience in Vietnam. I was a sergeant, I was a squad leader, and I spent a lot of time with my crew out in the jungle. Spent a lot of time on helicopters going in and going out, and I came to admire those helicopter pilots. I remember one time we were inserted under fire, and me and my squad got off the helicopter, and the chopper pilot had come in under fire. It endangered his life to bring us in. I got out and we hit up the hill, and I got to the top of the hill all by myself through the fire and everything, and I was under fire and I thought I was going to die. And when you're in that situation, you get on the ground and you try to somehow dig yourself into the ground without moving. I remember that chopper pilot who dropped us off didn't just all of a sudden leave. He came back in under fire. He came in about 4 feet above me and back and forth with his guns going, saved my life. The chopper pilot could do that simply because he knew his equipment. He had the experience. He knew how to chart his course through the jungle so he could safely fly and bring the troops in and take them out. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit we need a chopper pilot to take over the state of Oregon. We need someone that knows the system, that has the experience of how this government runs, that can chart a course for us to fiscal security. These issues are serious. They've got to be dealt with, and we need someone that has the experience, the strength, and the ability and the desire to make Oregon a better state. I ask you to vote for Dennis Richardson. We're handing out campaign donation forms. You can get them out, the donation forms up here. If you don't have one, get them at the door. We have a basket. I urge you to commit your funds to supporting Dennis Richardson for governor. We've got to make a change. We have a chance, folks, to make a difference in our state this year, and it's going to cost money. And we've got to support him with our words, with our support, what we can do. But we all need to write those checks. On his website, he's got a great site for donating money on his website. You can use your credit card or whatever. But the serious thing, it takes money to run a campaign. I urge everyone here to get 100% behind Dennis Richardson to be our next governor of the state of Oregon. Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. On the back of your program again, our next program will be in April. All of the Senate candidates are going to be here at that time. Senator Betsy Close represents us. We want to support her, get behind her 100%. Let's vote Betsy. We need her back in the Senate. Mark Callahan and Joey Perkins. What a great difference you're going to make. Merkley's got to go.
Yes.
We're going to bring a Republican senator into the federal government. Mayor Bill Currier, Don Handelan, thank you, thank you. God, peace outside. Remember, write those checks. Dennis Richardson for governor. Thank you for coming.
Just close.